I think that's part of the problem in the U.S. with the church. And this is another episode, I'm sure.
Yeah,
but
I've gone off topic a little bit.
No, that's fine. We're going to talk about this more later, I'm sure. A lot of things we talk about today, we'll probably talk about in future episodes. But I do feel that in America, Christianity as a whole, conservative Christianity, and especially we see it in our movement, especially in our area, or the Midwest or Bible Belt, or we're the northern part of the South or the southern part of the North or whatever.
Yeah.
Where we're at, I think we see it a lot, and it's this movement where we are more. Well, I mean, there's a lot of elements to it. We're more likely to go to the doctor than we are to go to prayer.
Right.
Things like that. But also, there's this issue of we're pretty spoiled. Mm-hmm. We have it pretty good. Financial trouble for us is not having enough money to go out to eat somewhere nice this week.
Or get a second car.
Right, exactly. First world problems.
Yeah.
I was complaining the other day because my Wi-Fi was so slow.
Right.
And I kind of feel bad in retrospect because it's not a problem. But those are first world problems. But then you've got this issue of the church, and this relates to race a lot. The issue of conservative churches and liberal churches as well, it's more about politics than it is about God.
Right.
So I think we've mentioned this before in discussions between the two of us. It's like Americanism is the new religion.
Yeah.
Or conservatism or liberalism or Republican Party is the church or the Democratic Party is the church.
Yeah.
Depending on who you're talking to, whether you're talking to a liberal, a progressive Christian, or you're talking to a conservative Christian, but it might be different, but it's politics before God.
Right.
In a lot of ways. And I think that's a problem in the way we relate to race as Christians in America. And part of the reason probably where we're not seeing some of the things they see in India or Africa or Latin America.
Yeah. And, the fact that, integrating politics with Christianity, I mean, there's things on both sides that work with Christianity.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And, the left and liberals' viewpoints on helping the poor and, helping each other out, living more communal living,
right.
Community.
Treating people well.
Treating people well, exactly. And then, but their standpoints on, abortion and those underlying issues that conservatives are dead set against.
Right.
You got to take things from both sides. So, I mean, do we have a moderate viewpoint on things a little bit? Maybe so.
I hope so.
Yeah. But so it's not extreme this or extreme that. So I think that's what really living a Christ-centered life is supposed to be about.
I think it is. And we were talking about love being foundational in the beginning, and how we relate to people. We're talking about last episode, and I think again, it's foundational with race. One of the things that I want to see less of is people just immediately defending their own position, without first trying to empathize with the other person.
Right.
So if we're going to learn to really operate in love and really love everybody and really try to be Christ-like, we have to start trying to empathize with people who are different than us and who have different views. If I'm a white, fairly conservative person, I need to really try hard to empathize with somebody who is very liberal and black, for example, or a guy who is, a communist and who is Asian or something, whatever the case may be.
Right.
If they're very different than me, I should try all the more to empathize with them, because that allows me, not necessarily that I'm going to change my opinion.
Yeah.
But if I can try to understand things from the perspective, more understanding is a good thing.
Right.
Ignorance is what causes hate.
Yeah.
If we can have better understanding of one another, at least try to have these conversations with one another in a civil way, then we're going to be more able to love each other.
Yes. And, I'm not a Christian because I'm a conservative, and I'm not a conservative because I'm a Christian.
That's so true.
Yeah. And so those two, it's like oil and water. They they really don't mix too well.
Right.
Having a political worldview one way or the other is important.
It is important, yes.
And I'm thankful every day that I was born in the United States.
Absolutely.
That I can have an opinion and that I can express my opinion.
And we're doing it right now.
Yeah, exactly. In other societies, this will be shut down immediately.
Exactly. In North Korea, for example, we would probably be shot.
Right.
Like 15 minutes ago.
Yeah. I mean, and it's not even out in the air yet.
Right, we would already be dead.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, it's great that we can do this. And like you said, having a political opinion is important. Your political opinion, though, a political opinion or position shouldn't dictate how you treat other people, and it shouldn't dictate how you live out your Christian principles.
Right. Bring it back to Christ's time a little bit.
Right.
We said earlier it was a hot mess politically.
It was.
And at the time period, things were building up so much with the Roman Empire, the oppression that the Romans put on the Jewish people. You know, they wanted the Messiah to be militant.
I think the disciples were like Antifa. They're like, let's overthrow the government.
Right.
Let's overthrow these fascist oppressors.
Yeah.
And they thought Jesus was going to do it. And they were excited about it.
Yeah. And, I mean, 400 years prior, they get all these prophecies about what he's going to do, and they interpret it in a way that Jesus was going to come and wipe out the Romans.
And they were, and who wouldn't be excited about that? They were being oppressed, basically.
Right.
And I think they were really disappointed when they found out that not only is he not going to overthrow the Roman government, he's going to die.
Right.
They didn't get it. They still didn't get it.
Right. And unfortunately, they don't get it today.
Right.
And, I mean, unless you accepted Christianity, but it's,
right.
And I think it's really important to realize the love that he showed. You know, when the Pharisees asked, should I pay this tax to Caesar, for instance? Mm-hmm. Whose face is on the coin?
Right. Render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's.
Right.
And to God that which is God's, right?
So politically, he just kind of did what he was supposed to. He followed the law of the land,
Yeah, and I don't think he really espoused any of the beliefs that would be consistent with what the Roman Empire was doing.
But, I think it's important to note that those were just brief segments.
Yeah, almost like a side note.
It was like, it's not important.
Right. And I think when applying Christian principles to politics or to this issue of race or whatever, we have to make sure that our opinions, politically or whatever, don't get in the way of being able to love our brothers in the church. That means if you're a very conservative Christian, you have to be able to love your brother who is a very liberal Christian.
Right.
And I see a lot of that not going on right now.
It's so true. And, I get frustrated. I get frustrated when I read posts online of some ideology that I don't agree with.
Oh, yeah.
But at the same time, what's the point? He's still a follower of Christ. He still claims to be a Christian. Just because I don't agree with him politically doesn't mean he's not saved or he's just a Satanist or evil.
Right. And a lot of, I think it's unfair, but a lot of conservatives had this idea that if you're a liberal or, whatever, that you want to murder babies because, because a lot of liberals support abortion. Well, that's unfair because I know that I know some liberal Christians who are liberal in their political philosophy because that a lot of liberal political philosophy says that we should help the poor.
Yeah.
And they see that Jesus says we should help the poor.
Right.
So they're looking at other issues and equating them with, that's how Christ would act. And they're saying, yeah, but there is this issue of abortion. And they say, well, it's already legal. Is it really ever going to change anyway?
Right.
And so I think we unfairly kind of lump them all together in this unfair category of, abortionists or whatever, pro-choice. That is a real hang-up. And then I think a lot of liberals look at conservative Christians and think, if they're conservative, they hate poor people and they just want to help the rich and they're not living Christ-like. there's a lot of issues. It's a very complex. It's complicated. There's a lot to it.
Right. And, I think what we said before, we're not going to have the answers right now. We're just trying to find the right questions to ask.
Absolutely.
And to get the conversation going. I mean, I hope and pray that this podcast reaches millions of people. I
hope so.
That's my end goal. And so if you're listening to this right now, and you just don't know really how to feel, I mean, I think the bottom line is we all have the same evidence. We all have the same structure. I mean, we just have different viewpoints to get to where we want to go. But we all start at the same thing.
Right. And we all start with the Bible, and it's funny how you can get such different interpretations from things sometimes. But I was telling Ann, we were talking about this last night, and I was talking to my wife, and we were discussing how my view of this issue of racism and what happened in Charlottesville or whatever, whether specific or just in general, my view can be so different than somebody else's who's more conservative than me.
Yeah.
Or my view can be so different from some of my liberal friends, or from some of my friends who are black and have lived that black experience that I can't live and I never will know. I can try to be empathetic toward it. I can try to be open-minded and listen. But I can't live it or experience it. And my example was this. Looking at New York City. I've never been to New York, but I've seen pictures of New York. I've been to a lot of big cities. So here's my idea. Say you're in New York City, and one person is looking down at a picture in their hand of the city. Another person is looking out the window of a high rise. And another person's in the harbor looking at the city. Somebody else maybe is in an alley between two buildings, and someone else is on the International Space Station. And we're all looking at the same thing.
Yeah.
But we're going to see some very, very different images.
Right.
And that's how this issue of race is. If you were born in a wealthy black family, your views on it are going to be different. Your experience is probably going to be different than if you were born in a very poor black family. If you were born in a poor white family, your views are going to be different than those two groups and a wealthy white family. And if you grew up in a neighborhood that was pretty diverse,
right,
regardless of your race, you're going to have a different viewpoint than if you grew up, say, as a black kid in a neighborhood that was pretty much all black, or a white kid in a town where everybody was white, which is, by the way, is where I came from, is a town, basically, well, not even a town, but I grew up in the middle of nowhere, and then we moved to a town. But as a little kid, I was lived on a farm pretty much, and I only knew white people. So your views, depending on where you're coming from or whatever, your little community, your views are going to be very different because you're seeing something totally different. You're looking at the same thing, but you're as a totally different angle.
That's a perfect point. We're seeing the same thing from a different perspective.
Right.
And that's, I mean, do we look at Christianity like that? Because, I mean, we come from an organization that believes truth. Mm-hmm. But we believe in absolute truth. But I don't think we have the absolute truth. Mm-hmm. I think we're closer than some churches, obviously. Right. But there's so much more to it than we're not getting.
There's things we're missing.
Yeah.
And I think we have to admit that if we want to move forward. I think we have to admit that if we want to. We're not God.
Exactly.
That we have to admit that.
Yeah.
And we are not probably ever really going to know absolutely 100% all truth that is truth. And live it, because here's the thing, and I think you're right. We're closer than some others, and I'm glad for the church that I've grown up in, and I've been here. You haven't been here your whole life. You've come to this from another background, another faith tradition. You're Christian, Baptist church and a Christian church.
Yeah,
but I've grown up in this. I'm glad for that. But sometimes we can be arrogant about it, and the same thing with race. It's the same kind of thing. But we have to understand that when even the Bible And the perfect word of God, if you were to take the word of God and give it to a person,